The 1990s presented a new voice to KTIB listeners in Greg Larose. Let's check in with his memories of working on Green Street.
How are you doing today, Greg?
Doing real well. Good to be on with you and good to kind of revisit the old times.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Where are you originally from?
I'm from right there in the Thibodeau area. My family grew up in Donner. A lot of folks are probably familiar with Chester's, the restaurant my mom runs. Graduated from Edie White in '96. And so, getting a chance to work right there in Thibodeau was really nice because it involved covering a lot of friends, family, and places, and things I already was familiar with.
Did you go to school, did you go to college afterwards?
Yeah, I went to LSU, and really KTIB was the first, you could talk about my trip into the real world. It started right there at KTIB. I got out in December of '90. And a couple of months later, Miss Marie Bergeron was running the station at the time, and just so happened to send in my resume. I sent it everywhere at that point, looking to get a job. And right there in my backyard, there was someone willing to give me a chance, and I had a chance to help out really with sort of the behind the scenes, running the board, making sure things got on the air. Got some great experience nursing things along with. That was when they did the live Cajun music show from Doug's on Saturdays. And that was really just, looking back on it, a really unique experience, and that something not a lot of stations do, bring a part of the area's heritage to the airwaves. And, with Billy Pete hosting at the time, providing all of the commentary in Cajun French. That was a lot of fun, and I look back on that time really, really fondly. Was asked to pitch in a little bit with getting high school broadcasts on the air. Marvin Dugas and Steve Calderera were doing those at the time. And Nichols broadcast with Darren Fonz as well. I left KTIB in '91 to get back to Baton Rouge and take a job opportunity there, but I wound up coming back to the station in '94 as news director and doing more of the same. So really what I grounded myself on in radio was news before I ever took the position with Tiger Rag. As you mentioned, I was a guest on Jim Inkster's Louisiana Live. Prior to that, I worked with Louisiana Radio Network. So radio's really kind of been my first maiden, and I don't know that I've ever shaken the bug yet. And just having an opportunity to catch up on the old times at KTIB is kind of nice because it takes me back to my radio roots.
And also to mention some of the people you obviously worked with, I'm sure it must have been a real delight to have the experience of working with Marie Bergeron.
Exactly. I think the term institution might be thrown around too much, but when it comes to Thibodeau Radio, Marie Bergeron is an institution. In school, we learned a lot out of books, but it really wasn't until I stepped in right there on Green Street that I got to know. You got the real lesson in radio from Miss Marie. Really not just in the technical side of how I'm supposed to write and report the news, but how things outside the station affect the day-to-day operations. And really, I list her as one of my major influences in such a positive way with really what I'm doing today. I'm still dabbling in radio, but I'm on the print side of journalism, but the management skills and such I learned all started with Miss Marie down there at KTIB.
Well, let's also talk about another gentleman you worked with who established himself very well in broadcasting, Roy Vicknair.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just, again, I think institution applies. Generations have really grown up with Roy's voice, taking them to work in the morning, and you won't meet a nicer gentleman in person. In my second stint, I had a chance to work with Roy when KTIB had brought him back to revamp their morning show, and just a consummate professional. The voice to kill for, really, if you're in the broadcasting field. And again, just a great family guy and gentleman. Made coming to work such a real joy day to day because you knew you'd get a chance to work with somebody who really took seriously the work that he did, but made it a fun place to work as well.
Very good. Now, also, let's talk about another gentleman who, of course, made his name in our area as longtime owner of KTIB while you were there, Mr. Ray Sadie.
Again, I think that you go back to learning the business of radio, and also I think one of the things that Mr. Ray stressed involvement, that you just weren't there to punch in a clock at 9 and punch out at 5, or however your meetings that you covered were scheduled. You had sort of an obligation as an employee of Laterre to get actively involved in the market that you covered. He made that clear to us. And, you know, if you're just out of college and such, you might have these high, lofty aspirations as to what a broadcaster is supposed to be, or at least you think one is supposed to be. But I think that was really the bonus side of it for me, and having grown up in the Houma Thibodaux area, that you were able to grasp these lessons that were being taught to you by good managers like Mr. Ray, and it's just a matter of learning under his wings along with Miss Marie. Gave me that grounding that, again, I point back to those two individuals and really credit them with where I've come since then.
Now, in the 2 stints you were at KTIB, were there any stories that you remember occurring that seemed to stand out more?
You know, I'll always, you know, I'm sure some people would rather forget the May 1995 floods. And I'll say 95, and if I'm mistaken, and it's 94. It's one of those 2 years. I lived on the bypass at that time, and I can remember just kind of being aware of rain coming down and coming down and coming down, and having to run to the station at about 10:30 that night and relieve the night board operator, and essentially make plans to not so much be on the air overnight, although we were, but to also have everything up and running for the morning when people were going to wake up and find out that their route to work or their school was closed, and just assess the damage around Upper Lafourche at that time. Really serious flooding down around Lafourche Crossing, up in the Chack Bay area in that ward. And I think maybe because during my time there, we never really had a serious hurricane the likes of Betsy or Andrew. That's going to really stick out for me. And, you know, I say I enjoyed it, and people will wonder, how could you enjoy that? But when you get into this line of work, you know, one of the things that I really have always appreciated about radio is its immediacy. I knew everyone turned to KTIB for that type of information, to either let them know when things were going to get better or to point out where the problems were the worst. And that was a real opportunity for me, along with the help of Ms. Marie, Roy, Darren Font, and the whole staff to step forward and to really come to the forefront with information that was needed at a really crucial time for our listening audience.
Very true. Now, also, you mentioned Darren Fonts just now, who a lot of us remember from sports. He must have been a pretty good guy to work with as well.
Oh, without a doubt. And again, you know, I loop him into the group with Ms. Marie and Roy as folks just made it fun to come to work every day and took their jobs really seriously. In my career, I've had a chance to work with guys like Jim Hawthorne, the voice of the LSU Tigers, and a lot of guys who've been in the play-by-play business, color commentating, and I put Darren Fonts into that group, and one thing he left was just his preparation. You would never really catch Darren off of his guard when it came to Nicholls State sports, whether it be football, baseball, or basketball. He had done his homework when it came game time, and with the help of David Lowry doing his play-by-play at the time, they were just such a strong combination. I think Nicholls was very fortunate to have them as sort of a promotions arm for Colonel Sports, because they took what they did, especially Darren, so seriously. You could tell in the product. It's a really, really fine product that they put on the air.
Were you also at the station when our current GM, Linda Bellinger, was there?
No, I didn't have a chance to work under her. I left KTIB in the summer of '95 to go to work for WJBO in Baton Rouge as a morning show producer. But really, a piece of my heart has always been down there, and it was always good to kind of keep up the goings-on with the management as it changed. The ownership obviously changed as well. But I think KTIB's always done a great job, and I know Linda's been partially responsible for this, for maintaining its identity as a community radio station. The face of radio has just changed inside of the decade that I've been away from the station, and that with group ownership, a lot of these stations just sort of sound like big city types. But KTIB's always managed to keep that community atmosphere coming from its airways. And again, you have to credit Miss Marie and everyone who's tried to fill her shoes since then with keeping it that way.
Okay. Also, now, when did you start going to work for Tiger Rag?
Tiger Rag came about in February of 1997. The magazine, just about 6 months to a year prior to that, was acquired by some folks I worked for at WJBL. They were locally owned. The station was locally owned. Right around 96 was when you saw the big buyout of local stations by the big conglomerate. And the folks that had owned WJBL decided that when they were bought out of radio, they would go into the publishing business. They owned a couple of publications. Tiger Rag was one of them. As I said, I've worked with Jim Hawthorne, the LSU Sports Network, and they just thought I was a good fit. Although I had no prior print experience other than writing a column for the Bayou Catholic and putting together a magazine, I was totally ignorant. And I let them know this, and I let them know I was quite scared of this too. But they had said that they knew nothing either, so we made a really good fit together. So from February of 97 on to January of this year, I was responsible for putting out Tiger Rag, that independent publication devoted to LSU sports. I still keep in close touch with all those guys, help them out with their website. So again, it's kind of like KTIB, that little bit of the magazine and the publication is still in my blood. Glad to get a little fix of it every now and then.
Well, in the years that you covered LSU sports, I know this may be kind of hard to answer because so many things and so many sports can go on in a rough 4 or 5 year window, but there's anything in your mind covering the team that stands out most?
I really look back and appreciate all of the one-on-one opportunities I've had with head coaches. I know that's something that's pretty hard to come by unless you devote a lot of hours each day and each week to really being intimate with the information. And I enjoyed working alongside the reporters who are also on that beat. Some of them obviously are still on that beat, but the coaches as well. You know, when you get to a position with LSU, a school of that caliber, you're obviously going to be covering some coaches that are held in pretty high esteem by their colleagues. And I think Skip Bertman jumps to the forefront there, given his success on the national level. A man not just with insight on how to put together a winning baseball team, but all of that and how it applies to life off the field as well. I think that's why you see him enjoying such success as an athletic director too. John Brady, really interesting, spirited guy to follow as well, having really turned around a team that was in dire straits and brought it to a pretty decent level of success given the tools he had to work with. And looks to be kind of on a more consistent path now with the talent level he's acquired. And obviously Nick Saban as well, just a very intense, professional coach, somebody who really has a high standard for himself, the staff that surrounds him, and that trickles down obviously to the players who, in the stint that I've seen him coach, now I left after, I guess you could say, his third season in charge, still kind of keeping in touch with things now. I've seen players matriculate through his system, and they tend to really take on some of his characteristics as well. And I'd be remiss if I left out Jerry DiNardo as well, for all the heartbreak that he caused Tiger fans. He was still an individual in his own right that had an approach and really cared about the players underneath his charge. And again, it's exposure to those types of people, and I'd hate to start naming players because I know I'd leave someone out, but really getting to see their insights and find out what makes them tick, what makes them so successful. That's kind of what I look back at Tiger Rag, along with just seeing some fantastic sporting events as the moments I cherish and remember the most.
Well, tell everybody what you're doing right now.
I left Tiger Rag, as I mentioned, towards the beginning of this year. I actually relocated to the New Orleans area when my wife took an accounting job in Metairie. And over that time, from about January through June or so, I did a little stringing for the Times-Picayune, got a chance to cover Tulane and UNO Sports, LSU as well in the mix, along with a little high school. and I continued to just kind of figure out what would be my next step. I contemplated a return back to radio, actually, and did a little stint with WWL, and ended up getting an offer with the News Banner. It's a 3-time weekly publication newspaper on the North Shore, based in Covington, and they offered me a job as their assistant managing editor, and that's where I've been since July. And really, it's been so great up here because, as I mentioned, with the radio background, it's kind of thrown into the fire of print journalism. I still have a lot to learn, and that's kind of been sort of a hallmark of my career to this point, all grand spanking 13, 14 years of it, that I've always had an opportunity to learn wherever I go, and the case really applies up here with the News Banner. Really stressed at the News Banner that we are the community newspaper, and it kind of allows me to tap upon the resources I started developing as somebody working the board and the news director at KTIB.
Well, before we go, is there anything you'd like to tell the listeners that will be listening to this program?
Just, thanks for all of the positive feedback that I've received from you throughout my career. Even post-KTIB, I had folks who would come up to me and mention that they'd hear me on one radio station and the other, and just to have that kind of support from folks in your hometown is really great, because it reaffirms the career decision that you made. We'll never retire based upon the financial benefits. No early retirement based upon the early financial benefits from radio broadcasting or print, for that matter. This is something we do because we really love it. It's in our blood, and that folks from around there that listen can tell us, hey, good job, we appreciate what you do, you do it well. That's all the reward, and that kind of beats anything you could get financially from this career.
Greg Larose, another proud member of KTIB